What is going on, everybody? It is Jake Wilson here with KPD Sports Media. Today, we got something that I've been trying to do for a long time now. I just haven't had the time. But we've had so much go on in the college basketball landscape in the past couple months. Obviously, you had players go to the draft. You have transfers coming in, new recruits coming in. With everything going on this offseason, I think it would be a good time to rank my top 10 college basketball teams going into this next season. So first off, I just want to say there are some teams who I think are going to be really good this season that I don't believe are top 10 teams right now, but could get up there in the future. I just need to watch them play. So first off, Iowa State, TJ Alsenberger, good coach. I'm just not sold on them after what happened in the tournament last year. Now, granted, they made it to the Sweet 16, but there was a lot of high hopes for this team even going to the Final Four. Some talks of them being a number one seed last year in the tournament. I just don't know if I like them that much. They were literally one team off this list that at the 11 spot. Purdue, you got the Purdue shirt on. Without Zach Edey, how is this team going to look? We need that number 5 presence down low. Don't know who's going to kind of fill Edey's shoes. I think you can put Trakoff and Wren down there at the 5, but then it would be a really small lineup. Obviously, Daniel Jacobson coming in, the 7'3" freshman. But how polished is he going to be his freshman year? Is it going to be another Zach Edey situation where you kind of work that way up? So Purdue's off the list. Arkansas, obviously the biggest news with Arkansas is Coach Cal going to them, picking up good guys like John L. Davis. I like the team. I just don't think with the track record that Coach Cal has had in the past couple of years, how is this team going to pan out? So I have them at 13. And then my last team that I left off the list was Kentucky. I think they did a lot of great things in the transfer portal this year. One of my favorite pickups, obviously, was Jackson Robinson from BYU, not going to the NBA, following his coach to Kentucky. I think Jackson Robinson is going to be a very good player next year. And I think Kentucky's going to really turn some heads. This is a team who, after Coach Cal left, the recruits left, and people were starting to, doubt that team a little bit. And I think Mark Pope's going to be a great coach for them. And I think Kentucky's honestly going to have the same standard, if not better, next season than they've had in the past couple seasons. So I'm really excited to watch that team play. They just weren't on my top 10. So I guess we should just dive straight into this list. At number 10, it was a two-way tie with two SEC schools, with Auburn and Tennessee. Now, Auburn with Bruce Pearl coming off a season where they lose in the first round against Yale, a 4-13 upset. What are they going to do to kind of fuel that loss from last year? And what are they going to do to prove the doubters wrong this season? So what do? They bring in J.P. Pegues from Furman, who I've seen play the past 2 years in person at the SoCon tournament. Pegues is a very solid player. I love to watch him play. Great defensive intensity. He's a bucket getter. He can dish the ball out. Pegues is going to be one of those players this year who I think could break out and potentially be like a Marcus Damask, like a Lance Jones, Aaron Estrada. I feel like I'm forgetting one, and I always forget one when I mention the big transfers. Oh, Dalton Connect. So like from a small school going to a big school, I think that J.P. Pegues is going to have a great season next year with Auburn, and I think Bruce Pearl's going to get a lot out of him. Another transfer coming in, Miles Kelly from Georgia Tech, averaged 13.9 points per game. And then obviously Johnny Broome coming back is a huge piece, averaging 16.5 points per game. Big rebounder, great defensive presence. He was a small school guy as well. He came from Morehead State a couple years back. So I think Auburn is a solid team. And when you bring out that lineup, and also just the fuel of losing last year in the first round, I'm really excited to see what Bruce Pearl's going to do with this team, and I think they're still going to be very scary. And then obviously my other team, Tennessee, I really like Rick Barnes as a coach. I think he's a great defensive head coach. I think this team's going to be very sound defensively next year, especially bringing back guys like Sakai Ziegler and Jabari Meshack. Meshack not really having a lot of points per game, but I think defensively he's a good player. And then obviously the transfers coming in. You have Dubar coming from Hofstra, averaging 17.8 points per game. Chaz Lanier, North Florida, averaging almost 20 points per game. He was a very highly acclaimed transfer coming into this season. And then one of my favorite players from the Big Ten last year, Not last year, but just I think in the Big Ten itself. Felix Okpara coming from Ohio State. I was really upset when he left that school, but they filled his role at Ohio State. But Felix Okpara is a guy who's not really going to get you a bunch of buckets, but he's going out there to be this defensive presence who's going to, get players away from the basket, swat shots, very good rebounder. He's tall and lanky. Um, Akpara could be a defensive player, first team next year for the SEC. But I like what Tennessee did last year. Obviously, bringing in Connect and turning him into a lottery pick. So I think Chaz Lanier is going to have a great year, and I think Zakai Ziegler is one of the best point guards in the country. So Tennessee at 10, Auburn at 10. I feel comfortable about it. At number 9, we're going to go with the Creighton Blue Jays, coached by Greg McDermott, bringing back Stephen Ashworth. You also bring back Mason Miller. And then obviously the biggest news, Ryan Kalkbrenner coming back, averaging 17.3 points per game last year. One of the best defensive players in the country, is huge for Greg McDermott and this Creighton Blue Jays team. And then you have to talk about one of the biggest transfers and one of the most underrated transfers, Pop Isaacs coming from Texas Tech to Creighton, averaging 15.8 points per game at Texas Tech last year. I think this is going to add another scorer on this team. Obviously, when you lose Baylor Shireman, you need someone to pick up that scoring. But then also you have Jemiah Neal coming from Arizona State, averaging 11 points per game last year. This Creighton team is a team who I had high hopes for last year. Now, when you add the players like Pop Isaacs, Jemiah Neal, and then Kalkbrenner's just going to keep on getting even better. Stephen Ashworth's a great player. Creighton is a team who I could see making a Final Four run next year, and I would not be surprised at all. I think the biggest thing that they need to do is just win the games that you need to win, right? Last year there was just some games who I just thought that they fell off and they just didn't even look themselves. But this is a team who beat UConn last year. And Ryan Kalkbrenner is one of the, like I said, one of the best offensive players in the country. So I have no problem with Creighton here at 9. I could even see them being as high as 6 in the season, maybe 5. But Creighton, number 9, I love it. So that leads us to number 8. We're going to go down to Chapel Hill with Hubert Davis and the UNC Tar Heels, bringing back Elliot Cadeau, R.J. Davis, obviously coming back for his 5th season, averaging 21.2 points per game. I think he's one of the favorites to win the Player of the Year next year. You have the top 10 recruit and Ian Jackson coming to the team. Cade Tyson from Belmont, who I think is a very underrated transfer. And then Van Allen Lubin from Vanderbilt, 12.3 points per game. You also got guys like Seth Trimble coming back. Trimble, who I think is a very underrated player, entered the transfer portal and was like, you know what? I'm going to come back to North Carolina. I think it's a great choice. I think UNC overall just continues to disappoint. And this season is a huge season for Hubert Davis because you have the talent this year. You really do. I mean, obviously Baycott's gone, but RJ Davis coming back, Elliot Cadeau is just going to get even better at the 1. And then you have a top 10 recruit in Ian Jackson. I mean, you have the pieces, Hubert. We need to see some progress out of you. And so I think that this is a boomer bust season for UNC. If they don't make it to the Elite Eight or the Final Four this year, I think this could be a season where you're starting to question about Hubert Davis and what he can do. I mean, I'm just being completely honest. RJ Davis should be one of the best players, if not the best player in the country next year. So if you have one of the best players in the country and you have all these pieces around him, UNC should be in the Final Four. So I like them here at 8. The only reason I have them this low on the list is, what are we going to do? Last year, you disappointed. The year before, it was even more disappointing. So until Hubert Davis can prove me right, I'm going to keep them this low on the list. At number 7, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but I'm going to put Duke with John Shire. Tyrese Proctor's coming back, and I think he's going to probably play the 1 next year with Jeremy Roach leaving. Caleb Foster, Cooper Flagg, the best recruit in the country. Malik Brown from Syracuse is probably going to play the 4. You also got guys like Mason Gillis. You have Malach. I think that's his last name. I don't know. And then Isaiah Evans coming from North Mecklenburg in Charlotte, North Carolina. This team's absolutely loaded. And I think John Shire this year is like, you know what? We are looking for players who are bought into the program. It's not all about themselves. And I think picking up a guy like Mason Gillis, no biased, it just shows what he's looking for in players, which is we're out here to win. This is not about doing your little TikTok dances and going out there and boosting your draft stock. John Shire wants to win games here, and I really like what he is kind of putting into this culture and showing the guys that this is Duke basketball. We're all about winning, and we haven't been doing that these past couple seasons. So I think with Shire bringing in the right guys, I think Cooper Flagg, obviously, who's probably going to be the number one pick in the draft next year. Uh, I think that Flagg is a great player. He could be a distraction at some point, but I think if John Shire can hold back that distraction, you have veterans on the team like Tyrese Proctor and Mason Gillis to maybe bring that down. I think that Duke is going to be all right next year. They are my favorite to win the ACC. At number 6, we're going to the Big 12, and we are going to go with Houston. I see a lot of rankings where Houston is ranked higher than 6, but the only thing that's holding me back is this team disappoints. It's kind of like a UNC situation. You have so many high hopes for Houston, and then they just don't do shit. So last year, they get absolutely demolished in the Big 12 tournament, and then they almost lose to Texas A&M, who had Wade Taylor, and I'm sorry, Wade Taylor's a hooper, but he's a generational shot chucker, okay? You had someone shoot 6 of 26 from the field last year, and you almost lost to the team. And they bring back some solid players. They get a transfer in Milos Uzan from Oklahoma, averaging 9 points per game. I'm not sold on this Houston roster. I think defensively, they're going to be great next season. Probably top 10 in KenPom. But LJ Cryer is the biggest piece coming back, averaging 15.5 points per game. Cryer's going to be the scorer on this team. Emmanuel Sharp, Jawan Roberts, Javier Francis, all going to be great defensively. This is just going to be a great defensive team. And you can't count out Kelvin Sampson. Obviously, this team's probably going to have a really good record next year. The Big 12 is going to be solid overall. But Houston, I think they'll be a solid team next year. Obviously, I have them at 6, so they're going to be solid. But what we need to see next year is we need to see them make a run in the tournament because it just hasn't happened, and they keep on getting upset. So what do we need to do? We need to see Houston at least in the Elite 8 next year, and then that's going to kind of sell them to me as being a top 5 team. At number 5, mentioned them a little bit ago, but the team that I have better than Houston in the Big 12 is going to be Scott Drew's Baylor. Jeremy Roach coming in, averaging 14 points per game at Duke last season. Jaden Nunn's coming back. VJ Edgecombe is a top 5 recruit in the country, according to ESPN 100. Langston Love averaged 11 points per game last year. And then one of the best transfers, I believe, in Norchad Omier, coming from Miami, 17 points per game. Is probably going to play the 5. Scott Drew, you just always do it, man. And I really loved what Scott Drew has done with this program. Last year losing to Clemson, a tough loss, but I don't think that really taints what Baylor is doing day in, day out, year in, year out. This is a great team. And frankly, I like them a lot better than Houston just because what I think they can do offensively and defensively. I don't really have anything else to say. I really like this team. I think they're going to be solid all year. I wouldn't be surprised if they were number 1 at some point in the AP. This is the second best Big 12 team, in my opinion. So at number 4, we have to go with Gonzaga here. They're bringing back a lot of key pieces from last year's team. Ryan Nemhard, Nolan Hickman, Ben Gregg, Graham Ike. I'm really bad at pronunciations. I don't know if you guys really know. I think it's Ike. Purdue played them twice last year. I should know. And then one of the biggest pieces coming in, Michael Ajayi from Pepperdine, averaging 17.2 points per game. There was talk about him going to the draft. He decided not to. Mark Few, we need to get back in that standard that you were a couple years back. And I think this Gonzaga team, this was a team at one point last year. People were questioning if they were even going to be in the field. And they did. They made a run to the Sweet 16. Obviously, lost against my Purdue Boilermakers. But this is a good team. This is a really good team. And especially with the young talent they had last year, they're just going to continue to get even better. I think Michael Ajayi at the 3 is wonderful. This team now has a lot of scorers, and that's where they kind of struggled last year. I think Nemhard's one of the best point guards in the country. Very quick, very speedy, sound defensively, and I think he's going to dish the ball out to Nolan Hickman, Michael Jahi, and then obviously Graham Ike, I don't know what I'm going to call him, and Ben Gregg are very defensively sound, good rebounders of the ball. Ike, again, has a very good post presence. He can have 12, 14 points a game just down in the paint. So I mean, I have no questions that Gonzaga is going to be a great team next year. I don't know if I will ever see them at number one, but they could, because they could be undefeated when it comes to the end of the regular season. I haven't really looked at their preseason yet, but I know that I don't think anybody in the Western Coast Conference is gonna show them anything. So Gonzaga at 4, I like it. Maybe I don't even like it. I love it. I love it at 4. Number 3, we have to go with the reigning champions, the UConn Huskies. Dan Hurley, he's coming back. He said, screw it. Let's try to go for a three-peat. You know who else is coming back? Alex Caravan. Alex Caravan is a guy who I think could be maybe a top 5 player in the country next year. I love him. I really like what I see out of Caravan, and I think next year is going to be the year where he finally breaks out. Last year, you saw signs of it. But this year, I think with him being the guy, Alex Caravan's going to be an All-American next year. And so bringing him back is huge. Obviously, Liam McNeely coming to the team, top 10 recruit in the country. Aiden Mahaney, who I've liked since his freshman year at St. Mary's, he's departing from St. Mary's. He's coming into UConn, which if you can do what you did with Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer, who I think Cam Spencer was a baller at Rutgers, but man, he really showed his stuff last year, and he fit really well at UConn. So if you can do it, what you did with those two, and do it with Aiden Mahaney, who was averaging 14 points already, I think UConn's going to be wonderful. I really do. And then obviously Samson Johnson at the 5, Hassan Diarra, who you saw some playing time last year at the 1. UConn looks great. Now, some people are talking about them potentially being the AP number 1 team. I think that the people who have 2 and 1 are just unstoppable, to be quite frank. There are some wonderful players on these past 2 teams coming up, or on these next 2 teams coming up. There's some stout players and stout talent on these next 2 teams coming up. So I'd be surprised if UConn, no, I actually wouldn't be surprised. But I would be a bit shocked if UConn was the AP number 1 team next year. So that leads us to the runner-up, number 2. Flip-flop these a little bit, but then inevitably I think that the team I have at number 1 is the most talented team in the country. So let's just do it. Number 2, we're going to go with the Crimson Tide in Alabama. Nate Oates has done wonders with this team in the past 3 years. I mean, holy moly. And what a great run last year. This is a team who had one of the worst defensive numbers in the country last year. It looked like a G League, NBA G League game, even like a game against the Hornets and the Spurs or something. There was no defense at all. And then now what you do is you bring in defenders. So now you have the scorers and the defenders. Mark Sears coming back is huge for this team. He averaged 21.5 last year. I think he's going to be another front runner for player of the year next year. Latrell Wrightsell Jr. Averaged 9 points per game. He's probably going to play the 2. Chris Youngblood, who I really like coming from South Florida, he averaged 15.3 last year. Really good defensively and a good scorer. Grant Nelson, who was the guy in that UNC game, he's going to come back. I really like Grant Nelson. Another good defensive presence as well, but not the best, because the best defensive presence that they got coming in is Cliff Amore coming from Rutgers. Not the best scorer, but he is going to be a force down low. And that's really going to solve that problem that they had last year, was the inconsistency in the defense. And so what Nate Oates has done with all these transfers coming in and bringing back players from last year. I mean, obviously, they lost Rylan Griffin, good shooter. Aaron Estrada's gone. This team's still stout. I wouldn't be surprised if this team was in the Final Four again. And quite frankly, I think they will be in the Final Four again. I really like this team, um, and they're going to be scary to play against. So I'm really excited. I think this is going to be one of the most exciting teams to watch next year. So I cannot wait until they tee off next season. And that leads us to the number one team in the country. It's no other than Bill Self's Kansas Jayhawks. Dwan Harris is coming back at the one. Zeke Mayo coming from South Dakota State, who I think is going to be one of the best transfers in the country next year. AJ Storr. Okay, real quick. AJ Storr has transferred to a new school every single year since high school. He's been to 7 schools in the past 7 years. Side note, just want to point that out there. So I don't even know if he goes to the league next year, he'll go do his thing. But if he doesn't, he's going to transfer. There's no doubt in my mind. But AJ Storr's an absolute dog. KJ Adams at the 4, and then Hunter Dickinson, which I don't even know how he still has eligibility. Who cares? He's an absolute baller. This team's just stout. They are so stout. And, the Big 12 is going to be great next year. But this team is definitely the front runner in the country and in that conference. If I was in charge of the AP poll, I would definitely put Kansas as the number one team in the country. Okay. If I was in charge of the NCAA tournament committee, even before the season even started, I'd put Kansas as the number one seed. If they do anything but not win the Big 12 this year, I mean, even regular season or tournament, it's a little shaky sometimes. If you don't win the Big 12 this year, this season's a disappointment. If you don't make it to the Final Four, this season's a disappointment. This is a team who I think could be better than the team that won the tournament in 2022. That team's absolutely loaded. So if I think you're better than that, you have to be making the Final Four. I think this is I might put down bread right now for the Kansas Jayhawks to make it to the Final Four. You have the talent. You have the coach. You have the NIL money. This team's scary, man. They're scary. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was my list. If you guys have any questions, any comments, any concerns, I don't know why you would have a concern. Maybe because I'm a little crazy for having some of these teams on the list. Please leave them down in the comment section. If you guys have your own top 10 list, put them down in the comment section. Please don't forget to subscribe and push that bell notification if you like content like this. Please like the video as well. Didn't mention that before. But again, I will continue to do this throughout the season. So we'll see how this list looks next time we do it. But I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time.